The early morning light broke over Dawn Meadows as the golden rays stretched long shadows across the rugged terrain. On this brisk day, another veteran horse trainer pounded the gravel with a resounding thud that echoed across the property. Isabella Montgomery's perfectly painted nails clutched the time-worn wooden rail so fiercely that her knuckles turned the color of aged ivory. In the midst of this striking sunrise, a magnificent ebony stallion, whom everyone called Cyclone, reared high against the pale apricot sky, his intense, untamed eyes conveying a fury that had quickly become the stuff of legend throughout the region. "That's it! I'm done with this cursed beast," the trainer bellowed, spitting a cloud of dust as he hurriedly retreated from the corral. "In all my decades of work, I've never encountered a creature quite like him." His voice carried the bitterness of defeat and the weight of a failed challenge, each word punctuated by the sound of his retreating boots on the dry earth. Isabella watched the man as he limped toward his battered pickup, mentally noting his name among the illustrious cadre of trainers who had all, in their own distinguished ways, been unable to tame Cyclone. In recent months, no less than 5 acclaimed experts, each hailed as more expensive and celebrated than the last, had tried their hand, only to leave with bruised bodies and wounded pride. Each had failed to unlock the mysterious heart of this Cyclone stallion. Her thoughts drifted back to the soothing yet enigmatic voice of her late grandfather. His words reverberated in her memory like a mantra. "Some souls, Isabella, are like wild storms. They don't need taming, they need to be understood." These words had played over in her mind countless times since the somber funeral held just 2 months ago, the day she inherited this sprawling, once familiar ranch in the heart of Westbridge County, a land she scarcely knew how to manage. As a cool autumn wind swirled, whipping her dark, cascading hair about her face, Isabella approached the paddock where Cyclone was confined. The powerful Mustang paced restlessly along the fence line, his glossy midnight coat glistening with perspiration. Every sinewy muscle rippled with barely contained energy, embodying both beauty and defiance, a living contradiction that made him simultaneously breathtaking and impossible. "What am I supposed to do with you?" she murmured softly, the question aimed as much at herself as at the defiant animal. Her world of high-stakes mergers and glittering penthouses in Manhattan had left her woefully unprepared for the wild, unpredictable demands of life on the ranch. The seasoned ranch hands could manage the ordinary daily operations with quiet competence, but Cyclone? He was her burden, her grandfather's final, cryptic gift, a challenge laced with both danger and dark humor at her expense. The memory of her grandfather's funeral played back like a bittersweet film reel. The ancient ranch house had been filled to the brim with local townsfolk, all eager to share their recollections of Jonathan Montgomery, a man Isabella had only dimly known. Busy with building her empire in New York and making only sporadic, hurried visits back home, she had always promised herself that next time she would linger a little longer. Amid the shared memories, Maeve, a devoted housekeeper who had served the Montgomery family for decades, had pulled her aside after the service. "He saved that horse for you, dear," Maeve had confided in a hushed tone, insisting that Cyclone, with his fiery spirit and unbridled passion, was meant to mirror the very essence of Isabella herself. Lost in these reflections, a sudden sharp snort snapped Isabella back to the present. Cyclone's erratic pacing ceased as he suddenly froze, his gaze fixed intently on something beyond her shoulder. Spinning around in alarm, Isabella discovered a stranger leaning nonchalantly against the fence several yards away. The man cut an imposing figure in faded denim jeans and a worn cowboy hat that had clearly seen better days. His relaxed yet vigilant posture set off alarm bells in Isabella's mind, as she was fully aware that this was her private domain. "This is private property," she called out, striding purposefully toward him, her tone laced with the authority of someone used to boardrooms and corporate warfare. The stranger did not shift his gaze from Cyclone, instead softly replying, "He's hurting." His voice was low, imbued with a depth that took Isabella by surprise. "Your horse," he continued, "is not mean. He's in pain." For a moment her defensive armor faltered before her urban instincts took over. "Are you another one of those so-called horse whisperers?" she challenged, infusing her words with the skepticism honed by years navigating Manhattan's ruthless business corridor. "Because I've already squandered enough time and money on she began, only to be interrupted by the man's calm assertion. "No, ma'am." At last he turned to meet her gaze. His eyes, the color of a storm-laden sky before a heavy downpour, were shadowed by experiences that mirrored his own pain. "I'm simply someone who recognizes trauma when I see it," he said quietly, each word carrying the weight of lived hardship. As the morning unfolded, a familiar scene played out before an unseen audience. The man began to address an imaginary group with the ease of a seasoned storyteller. "My dear viewers, have you ever misjudged someone on first glance, only to find that pride and prejudice clouded your vision?" he asked, his tone conversational yet introspective. "Tell me, where are you watching from? Share your city, your country, and honestly, what would you have done if you were in my shoes?" His invitation was both an outreach to the unseen and a subtle challenge to reconsider the assumptions we all carry. "If you're invested in these tales of healing and hope," he continued, "subscribe and join me as we explore the unlikely meeting of a stressed city girl and a mysterious cowboy under the relentless Westbridge sun." Isabella crossed her arms, studying this stranger with a mix of curiosity and wariness. His rugged boots and weathered hands, testaments to years of hard, honest labor, stood in stark contrast to the polished, overpaid trainers who had come and gone from her property. "And I suppose," she retorted, "you're going to tell me that you can fix him? Just like that?" A wry smile played at the corner of his lips as he shook his head. "No, ma'am," he replied softly. "Nobody fixes trauma in an instant." He shifted his attention back to Cyclone, who had grown unusually still, as if absorbing every word that was spoken. The morning light illuminated silver strands in the stranger's dark hair, drawing Isabella's eye to a long, jagged scar running down his right forearm, partially concealed beneath his rolled-up sleeve. "And what is your name, mystery man?" she inquired, striving to maintain her cautious poise, even as her curiosity deepened. "Jack Cooper," he answered, his tone revealing little but promising depths of unspoken history. "I just moved to these parts last month," he added casually. "I've been lending a hand over at Wilson's place, old Mr. Wilson's ranch down the lane." Isabella recalled having met the venerable rancher at her grandfather's funeral. Mr. Wilson had mentioned hiring new help and hinted that Jack possessed a rare gift for understanding troubled horses. In her preoccupation with her own urban dilemmas, Isabella had paid little attention to his words, until now. "Well, Mr. Cooper," she said briskly, "if you're so adept at understanding horses, why are you lurking around my property rather than applying for the job like everyone else?" Just then, Cyclone approached the fence, his ears pricked forward in an alert manner that he had never displayed with any stranger. Jack remained perfectly composed, his breathing measured and deliberate. "I'm not here to apply for any position," he stated quietly. "Last night I saw him pacing these very circles, and he seemed to be choosing his words carefully in his own silent manner." His tone softened further. "Sometimes, the hardest pain to heal is the one you've carried for too long." Isabella felt a shiver run down her spine, a sensation that had nothing to do with the crisp morning air. "You sound as if you speak from experience," she remarked, her guarded demeanor giving way to a flicker of genuine interest. Jack's eyes met hers, and in that silent exchange, she saw a raw, honest vulnerability hidden beneath his rugged exterior. "Perhaps I am," he admitted softly. At that precise moment, Maeve's voice drifted from the main house, announcing that breakfast was ready. The sound of approaching ranch hands filled the air as they began their morning routine, their curious glances lingering near Cyclone's paddock. One of the ranch hands called out, "You're the one who helped with that wild mare at Wilson's place, aren't you?" Jack offered only a slight nod in response, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. As he subtly shifted his weight to distance himself from the gathering crowd, another voice chimed in. "They say you managed to calm her enough for Wilson's granddaughter to ride, almost defying fate after that near-fatal kick to the last trainer." For a brief moment, Jack's eyes flashed with a mix of pain and recognition, as though he were silently affirming that he understood the unspoken language of hurt. "I just needed someone to listen," he murmured, as if addressing both Isabella and the hushed assembly. "We all do, in our own way." Isabella's interest deepened as she considered the local gossip swirling around these events. The whispers of the town were reliable, if nothing else, and she recalled hearing about the incident at Wilson's place with a sense of foreboding. "Then tell me," she said, surprising herself with a newfound resolve, Come back tomorrow morning and show me what you mean by truly listening." With a sweeping gesture toward Cyclone, who watched Jack with an intensity that bordered on reverence, she added, "No contracts, no promises, just demonstrate your understanding." "Ms. Montgomery," Jack corrected softly as she referred to her in a moment of automatic familiarity. "Isabella," he amended, his tone both teasing and sincere. "I'm not looking to—" He paused thoughtfully. "Tomorrow at 7 a.m. Come back, and next time, please use the front gate rather than lingering suspiciously by the fence." His words, gentle yet firm, conveyed a clear boundary. As she turned back toward the house, Isabella heard a soft chuckle behind her, a sound that was unexpectedly warm and genuine, coaxing a reluctant smile from her lips. Behind her, Cyclone emitted a low, almost gentle nicker, the first tender sound she had heard from him since inheriting this wild estate. Maeve, waiting patiently on the porch with eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of many years, remarked, "Your grandfather always said, 'Some angels wear cowboy hats.'" Though Isabella rolled her eyes at the familiar quip, her heart softened just a little in response. "He's just another trainer, Maeve," she murmured, though Maeve's knowing smile and gentle pat on her arm suggested otherwise. "In all my years here," Maeve insisted, "I've never seen Cyclone look at anyone the way he looked at that man." At exactly 7 a.m. the next morning, Isabella found herself standing once again by Cyclone's paddock, her designer boots already caked in the familiar dust of Westbridge County. Glancing repeatedly at her watch, she wondered if the enigmatic cowboy would truly return. Her phone buzzed incessantly, an unwelcome reminder from her New York office, demanding urgent attention via yet another email. "Good morning," the screen read, all too ironic in its timing. Suddenly she was startled by Jack's quiet voice emerging from behind as he approached with a simple rope slung casually over his shoulder. "No saddle?" she teased skeptically, eyeing his minimal gear. "No whip? No elaborate equipment?" he replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "No, ma'am. May I just sit here for a while?" Without waiting for her consent, he eased himself down onto a patch of grass roughly 20 feet from the fence, as if to declare that sometimes presence was enough. Cyclone, roused by the shift in energy, raised his head sharply. "That's all you intend to do?" Isabella questioned incredulously, her voice betraying both disbelief and a reluctant admiration. "Just sit," Jack repeated softly, his eyes never leaving the horse. "Pull up a patch of grass if you'd like," he added, a quiet invitation for simplicity over the chaos of constant movement. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft ticking of time as the pair sat in an unspoken communion with Cyclone, each breath measured in sync with the rhythm of the morning. Isabella recalled the past few months with a wistful sigh. Endless schedules, the revolving door of trainers, and the overwhelming pressure to solve the enigma that was Cyclone. Had she ever truly looked at him not as an obligation, but as a living creature in need of understanding? Her phone buzzed again, yet this time Isabella chose to ignore it, letting the moment stretch into a rare interlude of calm. Cyclone resumed his steady pacing, yet now there was a subtle difference in his demeanor. Every few circuits he would pause, his left ear flicking in tune with a soft, almost imperceptible rhythm. Jack leaned forward slightly and murmured, "Watch his left ear." Isabella followed his gaze, noticing that the stallion's ear moved in time with Jack's own steady, deliberate breathing. "He's listening. He's connecting," Jack whispered, as if sharing a secret. "That's the first step toward trust." Before long, Jack slowly rose from his seated position, signaling the end of their silent communion. "That's enough for today," he declared gently. Isabella stood as well, dusting off her jeans, her mind swirling with the delicate interplay of trust and unspoken understanding that had just unfolded. Yet her phone buzzed once more. This time it was Miles Winston IV, her ex-fiancé, reminding her of the impending charity gala in New York. "I have a conference call," she protested, caught between two disparate worlds. Will you return tomorrow?" Jack asked, adjusting his hat with deliberate calm. "Same time at 7 a.m., he confirmed, his tone leaving little room for negotiation. Isabella hesitated, scrolling through missed messages on her phone, torn between responsibility and an emerging desire to simply be present. "Tomorrow, wear clothes. You don't mind getting dirty? And leave the phone inside," Jack added, his voice laced with a warmth that softened the edge of her corporate armor. Before she could object further, he turned and walked away, his silent stride carrying him out of the paddock, Isabella watched him disappear, noticing how Cyclone's intense gaze trailed his departure. The remainder of her day blurred into a series of video calls and endless emails, her New York life relentlessly demanding attention, even as her heart lingered back at Dawn Meadows. The echo of Jack's words and the quiet breakthrough with Cyclone remained with her. Each a reminder that perhaps, beneath the veneer of polished boardrooms and scheduled meetings, there lay an untamed truth waiting to be understood. In the quiet aftermath of her busy morning, Isabella found herself lingering in the soft glow of the fading daylight, her thoughts wandering back to that serene moment when Cyclone's ear had flicked in delicate rhythm. The memory of Jack's steady breathing and the almost hypnotic peace that had filled the paddock remained vivid, despite the pressing demands of her studies. Even as her mind tried to concentrate on work, she could not help but replay the silent communion between man and beast that had touched her heart so profoundly. Just then, as the day began to surrender to twilight, Maeve appeared in the doorway of the old manor. "I brought you some tea, honey," she said, her voice gentle yet laced with the unmistakable tone of familiarity that only decades of service could create. "I also saw your young man out there again." Isabella looked up from her laptop, her concentration broken by Maeve's unexpected announcement. "Out there? What do you mean?" Isabella inquired, her eyes scanning the room as she tried to process the news. Maeve nodded slowly toward the window. In the soft, ember-like light of the setting sun, a familiar silhouette could be discerned near Cyclone's paddock. Jack was seated exactly where he had been that morning, his figure outlined in a halo of golden hues as the day bid farewell. "He's been there for nearly an hour now, just sitting," Maeve explained, her tone both matter-of-fact and filled with an unspoken admiration. "And Cyclone hasn't taken his eyes off him for a single moment." Intrigued, Isabella rose from her seat and made her way to the window. Sure enough, outside in the waning light, Cyclone stood motionless and alert, every inch the magnificent creature that he was, his focus entirely fixed on the quiet, immovable figure beyond the fence. "Your grandfather would have appreciated him," Maeve added softly, as if revealing a cherished secret. "He always said that the finest souls on a ranch know that healing comes in the quietest moments." Before Isabella could articulate her own doubts about the inexplicable bond between the mysterious man and the troubled horse, Maeve had already retreated, leaving behind only a steaming cup of tea and a knowing, tender smile. Outside, the paddock seemed to transform under the amber and rose hues of the Texas sunset. Cyclone took a hesitant step forward, then another, as if drawn by some invisible thread of destiny, while the fading light cloaked the land in soft mystery. For a fleeting moment, Isabella felt as though her bustling New York existence had dissolved into insignificance in the face of such gentle beauty. At that moment, her phone vibrated with a message. It was Miles, reminding her of the upcoming gala. "Don't forget the gala next week. The board members are expecting you," read the terse message. For the first time in her career amidst the hectic demands of corporate life, Isabella wondered if perhaps these expectations would persist indefinitely, tethering her to a life that felt increasingly alien. The darkening sky and gathering clouds outside seemed to mirror her inner turmoil as she stepped away from her work and ventured out to the paddock, a ritual that had gradually become a lifeline in recent days. Over the past week, she had observed Jack's patient and persistent work with Cyclone. Each day, small but significant signs of progress appeared. A dropped head, a gently relaxed tail, a moment when the great horse edged closer to the fence before retreating once more. Yet today, the atmosphere felt charged with an unusual intensity. The heavy air, tinged with the promise of an impending storm, set Cyclone into a restless pace, his nostrils flaring as he detected the subtle change in pressure. "Storm's coming," Jack remarked, emerging by her side with a look of concern that belied his calm exterior. "A big one, I reckon." Isabella glanced at her weather app, which predicted only a slight chance of rain, a prediction that suddenly seemed laughably inadequate in the face of what was unfolding. Before she could protest, the sky broke open. Rain cascaded in torrents, transforming the dusty ground into a churn of mud within mere seconds. The air was filled with the blinding flash of lightning, and thunder boomed with a force that rattled the very earth. Cyclone reacted immediately, his fear erupting into a scream that tore through the roar of the storm. "He's going to hurt himself," Isabella cried, her voice barely audible over the clamor of the wind and rain, as she watched in horror while the great horse slammed into the paddock fence in a desperate bid to escape the deluge. Without hesitation, Jack dashed through the gate, moving steadily despite the chaos. "Stay back," he warned sharply as Isabella moved to follow, his tone laced with urgency. "He's too scared." A blinding flash of lightning momentarily froze everything in stark, surreal clarity. Then, in a moment that defied the pandemonium around them, Cyclone charged directly at Jack, an act born not of malice but of sheer, unadulterated terror. Isabella's scream caught in her throat as she braced herself for the inevitable impact, yet Jack did not flinch. Instead, he began to sing, a low, melodic humming that cut through the storm's fury like a fragile, hopeful thread. The gentle cadence of his voice, resonant with the warmth of distant lullabies that harkened back to a long-forgotten past, seemed almost magical. Slowly, the thunder and rain gave way to the tender power of his song. "That's it, boy," Jack murmured softly, his words soothing and tender enough to be heard over the cyclone. "You're safe. I'm right here." For a long, heart-stopping moment, Isabella watched as Cyclone's wild charge gradually slowed to a confused, wavering pace. The once frantic horse circled Jack, snorting and trembling, yet no longer lunging in blind panic. With each measured note of the song, Jack coaxed Cyclone into a semblance of calm, establishing a fragile bridge between fear and trust. Jack's calm voice soon took on a note of instruction. "I need you to walk, not run, to that gate and open it. We're going to guide him safely into the stable." Isabella, her heart pounding fiercely as she navigated the slick, muddy ground, listened intently. The gate creaked ominously as she pulled it wide, and for a moment, Cyclone's head shot up, as though he were caught between his ingrained instincts and the gentle insistence of the familiar voices. "Keep humming," Jack said softly, urging her to join in with any tune that might break through the dissonance of the storm. In a spontaneous burst of recollection, Isabella began humming an old show tune, a melody her grandfather used to play on the ranch's battered record player during quieter times. Slowly, the two voices, her soft, tentative humming interlaced with Jack's deeper, more resonant melody, wove together into an unexpected harmony. In the midst of the raging storm, the sound of their combined song created a corridor of solace. A temporary sanctuary where time seemed to stretch and the chaos outside was held at bay. Drawn irresistibly by the sound of their voices, Cyclone began to move with cautious deliberation toward the open gate. "That's it," Jack encouraged, his tone merging with the music. "You're doing so well. You're the bravest one here, aren't you? Fighting hard against memories that you can't even see." In that moment, something in his voice compelled Isabella to look sharply at him. For a brief, flickering second, she caught a glimpse of old pain hidden deep within his eyes, a silent admission of battles fought long ago. Yet, as quickly as it appeared, that vulnerability was concealed behind the determined focus Jack maintained on the horse. Together, they managed to guide Cyclone into the stable, their humming never once faltering despite the relentless storm outside. Within the shelter of the stable, the roar of the rain was softened by the roof, and the great animal's labored breathing began to ease. "Stay with him," Jack instructed, moving to retrieve dry blankets from a nearby shelf. "Keep on humming." Isabella felt a strange sense of intimacy as she found herself alone with Cyclone for the first time since all the previous, failed attempts to break through his hardened exterior. Now the enormous horse trembled beside her, his fear raw and palpable, yet no longer imbued with violence. Without thinking, Isabella reached out and gently touched Cyclone's neck. In that fleeting moment, time itself seemed to pause. The horse tensed for an instant before relaxing into the unexpected tenderness of her caress. Beneath her fingers, she could feel his pulse racing like a trapped bird, mirroring the rapid beat of her own heart. "I know what it's like," she whispered, surprised by the sincerity in her own voice. "Being scared of things beyond your control, feeling imprisoned by the weight of expectations." Her voice wavered as she spoke, each word a quiet confession of her own inner battles. Cyclone, as if acknowledging her vulnerability, lowered his head ever so slightly, leaning into her touch in a gesture of fragile trust. Before she could process the intimacy of the moment, Jack's soft, reflective voice broke in from behind. "Would you look at that?" he said, his tone gentle yet infused with a warmth that immediately made her feel understood. Startled by the unexpected tenderness, Isabella quickly withdrew her hand, her cheeks flushing with self-consciousness. I didn't mean to," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "You did exactly right," Jack reassured her, extending a blanket toward her as their fingers brushed ever so briefly, a touch that spoke volumes of shared understanding. Sometimes, the only way past fear is by walking right through it, together. The simple words, spoken amid the storm's fury, resonated deeply within her. For a long while, they worked side by side in comfortable silence, wrapping Cyclone in dry blankets and carefully examining him for any signs of injury from his frantic ordeal. Outside, the storm continued its relentless assault on the world, but inside the stable, a quiet transformation was underway. A barrier had crumbled. Not only for the wounded horse, but also for the unlikely pair of caretakers who now found themselves bound together by something intangible and profound. As the minutes slipped by, Cyclone's heavy breathing began to slow, his once wild eyes softening as exhaustion overtook his fear. "The song you were humming," Isabella finally remarked, watching the great animal settle into a peaceful slumber. "I've never heard that melody before." For a long, quiet moment, Jack remained silent, as though weighing his own memories before speaking. Finally, his voice emerged, soft and laden with, "My mother used to sing that song," he admitted quietly, "during storms just like this, back when I was young, before the accident took so much from me." His words carried the weight of unspoken histories and hidden sorrows, leaving Isabella with more questions than answers. Though tempted to press further, she chose instead to simply say, "It's beautiful." Their eyes met, and for the first time she saw beyond the guarded facade Jack had carefully constructed. There, in the depths of his gaze, lay wells of understanding and unhealed pain that mirrored her own struggles. In that silent, charged moment, the connection between them deepened in ways that words could scarcely capture. They stood together, dripping with rain and caked in mud, their silhouettes merging in the dim, comforting light of the stable. The fragile bond that had begun with shared music and quiet gestures was now unmistakably real. Yet, even as they embraced this newfound closeness, a buzz from Isabella's pocket shattered the spell. Her phone, miraculously still functioning despite the downpour, displayed a message from Miles. "Gala preparations finalized, car will pick you up at the airport Thursday." Staring at the screen, Isabella felt an unexpected pang of detachment. Looking first at Cyclone's peaceful form, then at Jack's steady, caring gaze, she realized that for the first time in her life, the glittering towers of New York seemed an impossibly distant world. The day after the storm, the ranch took on a subdued air of recovery. In the quiet solitude of her grandfather's study, a room filled with decades of meticulously preserved ranch records, Isabella found herself sifting through old files in search of insurance documents to cover the minor damage inflicted on the stable roof. The soft morning light filtered through dusty windows, casting gentle beams upon long-forgotten letters and yellowed newspaper clippings. As she opened one of the ancient drawers, a bulky manila envelope caught her attention. The envelope bore her grandfather's distinctive scrawl, with a single word, printed in bold letters: Cyclone. With trembling hands, she broke the seal and unfolded a collection of newspaper clippings, veterinary reports, and a handwritten letter that sent a chill down her spine. The first clipping, dated decades earlier, read, "Wild Mustang captured from the Carson Range herd. Remarkable specimen exhibits unusual protective behavior toward injured mare." Beneath the headline was a faded photograph of a younger Cyclone, proud, defiant, and exuding a raw, untamed spirit as he stood guard over another horse in a barren, sun-scorched desert. The subsequent document was a government report detailing the roundup. Clinical language recounted the aggressive resistance of the unruly Stallion, noting that extreme measures were deemed necessary for his containment. As Isabella read between the lines of bureaucratic jargon, a sinking feeling filled her stomach, an acknowledgement of the deep, unhealed wounds that had defined Cyclone's past. Unable to contain her rising emotions, Isabella called out softly, "Maeve?" The housekeeper appeared in the doorway once more, her hands still damp from her chores and her eyes reflecting years of quiet wisdom. "How long have you been at the ranch, dear?" Isabella asked, holding up the fragile papers. "Did you know about this part of Cyclone's past before Grandpa brought him here?" Maeve's expression softened, the sadness of long-ago memories stirring in her eyes. "Your grandfather spent many months trying to trace the history of that horse," Maeve explained quietly. "He said he'd never seen such profound pain in an animal's eyes." Isabella's voice dropped as she pointed to the photograph. "And what about the mare in the picture? What happened to her?" Maeve sank heavily into the worn leather armchair by the window. "She did not survive the roundup," she said with a pained sigh. "Your grandfather later discovered that Cyclone had silently witnessed her death, having been with her for years out in the wild. After that, he fought vehemently against any human who dared approach him." Isabella's eyes lingered on the final document, a bill of sale adorned with an astronomical figure. "He paid this much for a horse that no one could manage?" she murmured in disbelief. Maeve's gentle voice replied, "Jonathan Stanton could see beyond the anger. He recognized the deep hurt beneath Cyclone's defiant exterior. In a way, that pain reminded him of someone else he had once loved." Maeve's meaningful glance conveyed more than words ever could. Before Isabella could digest this revelation, a commotion erupted outside. Through the window, she could see several ranch hands clustered near Cyclone's paddock, their phones raised as they recorded something unusual. Clutching the envelope tightly against her chest, she hurried outside. What she witnessed brought her to an abrupt halt. There, in the midst of the chaos, stood Jack, with his back turned towards Cyclone. The great horse, now calm yet alert, was barely 5 feet away from him, its nostrils flaring as it absorbed the man's familiar scent. "He's been like that for 10 minutes now," one of the ranch hands whispered in awe. "I've never seen anything like this." A passing truck backfired on the distant road, causing everyone to jump, except Jack, who remained immovable. Cyclone, startled by the sudden noise, pranced away for a brief moment before slowly returning to his former position. "You lost someone too, didn't you?" Jack's voice resonated clearly in the crisp morning air, as if offering a shared understanding of unspoken grief. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. She glanced down at the photograph she held in her hand, then up at the scene unfolding before her. "I know what that's like," Jack continued, still motionless. "Losing someone you couldn't protect, carrying that guilt until it becomes a shield that nothing can penetrate." His words, simple yet laden with raw emotion, struck a chord deep within her. Even as the conversation trailed off into a thoughtful silence, the presence of shared loss seemed to weave an invisible bond between them. The unyielding spirit of the storm and the remnants of grief mingled in the cool morning air as Isabella stood there, pondering the uncharted depths of pain and healing. In that suspended moment, the tumult of her own inner world mirrored the quiet determination in Jack's eyes. Their connection was no longer defined solely by their roles on the ranch, but by the scars they both carried. A hidden, yet profound communion of souls who understood that sometimes the hardest battles were fought within. As the storm's fury began to subside, Cyclone lowered his great head, his warm breath softly ruffling the fabric of Jack's faded shirt. In that fragile silence, Jack's voice, rough with emotion, spoke words that seemed to come straight from a wounded soul. "But sometimes," he murmured, "we are given a second chance to trust again." With measured slowness, he turned to face the majestic horse, his eyes meeting those deep, soulful orbs. In that instant, no words were necessary. 2 hearts communicated across the distance, their connection transcending the need for speech. The Cyclone, the once turbulent stallion, did not recoil. Instead, his eyes locked onto Jack's, as though both recognized in each other a kindred spirit, a mutual acknowledgement of past scars and the hope of renewal. "The mare wasn't your fault," Jack said softly, his tone imbued with both regret and acceptance. "Just as Sarah wasn't mine." The name hung in the air like a whispered prayer, a secret confession of love and loss shared between souls who had known too much heartache. For a moment, the world around them seemed to blur, as Jack's shoulders tensed, betraying that he had revealed more than he had ever intended. Then, as if moved by an unseen force, Cyclone stretched his long neck forward. In an act of unprecedented tenderness, the wild creature voluntarily reached out to bridge the gap between man and beast. His muzzle grazed Jack's chest, right above the steady beat of his heart, an intimate touch that evoked an outpouring of emotion from those who bore witness. The ranch hands, who had gathered nearby, erupted in hushed, excited whispers. Someone fumbled for a camera, intent on capturing the miraculous moment for social media. Yet Isabella, standing amidst the murmuring crowd, was oblivious to everything but the raw, unfiltered tears silently streaming down Jack's face. In that solitary moment, he accepted Cyclone's gentle caress as if it were a benediction, a sacred promise of healing long overdue. Later, after the impromptu crowd had dispersed and Cyclone had retreated to his favorite quiet corner of the paddock, Isabella found Jack sitting pensively on the weathered fence. His gaze was lost in the vast, rugged expanse of the Texas landscape that stretched before him. "Sarah," he began, his voice barely above a whisper as he extended an envelope toward her. "She was my wife." The admission, simple yet laden with sorrow, hung between them. "She loved wild horses," he continued, his tone softening as memories mingled with regret. "We once worked together on a rescue program in Montana." He paused to draw a trembling breath before adding, "The stallion we tried to save, he was much like Cyclone. Traumatized, dangerous, lost." Isabella's heart clenched as Jack's words resonated with the truth of a past marred by personal failure. "I thought," he confessed with a pained laugh, "I thought I could reach him in time." His voice wavered, betraying the depth of his own anguish. Isabella longed to reach out, to offer some form of solace, yet she understood, just as Jack had learned with Cyclone, that sometimes the most compassionate gift is silence. "The accident," he finally said, his tone heavy with regret, "it made headlines in the racing world." There was a pause, as if the weight of unspoken guilt pressed upon him. "That's why I recognized your name later on. Your grandfather wrote to me afterwards, offering help, a job, anything." His confession was tinged with bitterness, but I was too broken to accept it. Jack's gaze shifted upward slowly, a quiet nod acknowledging the passage of time and the possibility of renewal. "And now you're here," he murmured, his voice low and measured. "Perhaps your grandfather knew something I didn't about second chances." He turned to look at Isabella, his eyes brimming with vulnerability and the promise of healing. In that moment, the brokenness between them, both the scars of lost love and the pain of unhealed wounds, felt almost tangible. Outside, in the paddock, Cyclone lifted his head as if to watch over the two, his gaze noticeably lighter, as if he too had begun to understand the delicate balance of shared suffering and the hope for new beginnings. The soft chime of Isabella's phone intruded briefly on the intimacy of the scene, a reminder of the gala looming ahead. But for the first time in her life, she did not reach for it. The world of board meetings and corporate ambition had receded into insignificance compared to the fragile, human drama unfolding before her. That very night, the video capturing the extraordinary bond between Jack and Cyclone went viral. When Isabella awoke the next morning, she was bombarded with hundreds of notifications and an urgent voicemail from Miles, a voice that normally exuded polished charm but now carried an undercurrent of barely contained excitement. "Darling," he said, "you've been holding out on me. Your video, your 1,000,000 views and counting. Do you know what this means? I'm flying in today. This is exactly what we need for the resort proposal. Call me." Isabella's eyes remained fixed on her phone, a silent storm of emotions brewing inside her, when Maeve's gentle knock on her bedroom door announced new visitors at the gate. "Miss Isabella, you have some visitors," Maeve said, her voice warm yet tinged with urgency. "News vans are here." In moments, chaos erupted outside the ranch. Reporters clamored for interviews about the so-called miracle at Sunrise Ranch. Social media influencers buzzed with sponsorship offers, and representatives from horse therapy centers called, seeking consultation opportunities. Amidst all the commotion, Jack continued working with Cyclone as though nothing had changed, his presence a stark counterpoint to the circus of media frenzy. "When all this attention isn't good for," Jack began, his tone low as Isabella finally managed to slip away to check on Cyclone. "We should move him to the back paddock," he suggested, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood the fragile nature of healing. Before he could finish his sentence, the distinct, ominous sound of an approaching helicopter roared over the paddock. Cyclone's head jerked upward, his newfound calm instantly shattered. "No, no, no," Isabella muttered, recognizing the distinctive logo emblazoned on the tail of the aircraft. "Miles, what are you doing?" The helicopter circled lower, evidently searching for a landing spot, its rotor wash stirring up a maelstrom of dust and debris. Cyclone reared up violently, his eyes wild with panic. "Get that thing out of here," Jack shouted urgently, moving swiftly to shield the trembling animal. His cry was swallowed by the roar of the helicopter's blades. Isabella's heart pounded as she fumbled to dial Miles's number, but before she could complete the call, Cyclone broke free. The majestic horse charged with a terrifying fence, slamming into the paddock fence and splintering the wood as he barreled blindly toward the stable. Jack sprinted after him, his voice lost amidst the cacophony, while Isabella screamed into her phone, desperate to reach someone who could restore order. By the time the helicopter finally landed, the damage had been done. Cyclone had barricaded himself in the furthest stall, trembling violently and bleeding from deep scrapes acquired during his frantic escape. Worse still, the once trusting creature now refused any human contact, even Jack, whose gentle methods had so recently begun to make a difference. At that moment, Miles emerged from the helicopter in an impeccably tailored suit, his arms outstretched in a contrived greeting. "What an amazing opportunity!" he exclaimed, his voice honeyed with excitement. "I've already spoken to the board and—" His sentence faltered as he caught sight of Isabella's furious expression. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and despair. "You've undone weeks of progress in just 5 minutes." "That's what's wrong!" Miles waved his hand dismissively, as if the monumental effort put into healing could be dismissed with a casual gesture. "Isabella, you're missing the bigger picture," he insisted. "This viral video is perfect timing. We can transform Sunrise Ranch into an exclusive luxury resort, a place where healing happens naturally." At that moment, Jack's quiet voice cut through Miles's impassioned pitch like a sharpened blade. Miles turned slowly, as if noticing for the first time the cowboy who had been quietly tending to the wounded Cyclone. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Miles asked, his tone incredulous. "The man who's been healing that very horse you just terrified." Isabella moved to stand beside Jack, her resolve crystallizing in the face of Miles's shallow promises. "And he's right," she declared firmly. "Get out, Miles. You're not wanted here." Miles's perfect smile hardened into a mask of disbelief. "Don't be ridiculous," he countered. "You can't be seriously choosing this ranch hand over the opportunity of a lifetime." Isabella's voice trembled as she fought back tears. "The Isabella you once were, before your mother died, would never have allowed this," she interrupted softly, her words a mixture of grief and defiance. Taking a deep breath, she continued, "I'm not selling the ranch. Not now, not ever." Miles's face darkened noticeably. "You're making a mistake," he warned. "The board won't wait forever. Think about your future, your career." With unwavering certainty, Isabella replied, "My future is here." The clarity and strength in her voice surprised even her. "Now please leave," she added, her tone final. "You've done enough damage." As Miles's helicopter lifted off and its downdraft stirred up swirling dust and debris around them, Isabella's shoulders finally slumped with the burden of her decision. "I need to check on Cyclone," Jack said quietly, breaking the heavy silence. "I'll come with you." But when they reached the stable, they discovered Maeve already there, softly singing an old lullaby. A familiar melody reminiscent of Jack's own song from earlier. The gentle tune filled the dim, quiet space, its soothing notes a balm for the traumatized horse. Cyclone's breathing, though still rapid, had finally eased, and his wild eyes showed signs of calm. Isabella moved to join Maeve's song, but Jack's steady hand on her arm gently halted her. "We need to talk," he said, leading her back outside into the golden twilight that painted the ranch in shifting hues of shadow and light. For several long moments, neither spoke as the weight of their unspoken truths pressed between them. Finally, Jack broke the silence. "I can't stay," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. The revelation sent Isabella's world reeling. "What? Why?" she demanded, unable to comprehend his sudden declaration. "Because you just gave up everything for this place," he replied, his tone heavy with the cost of his sacrifices. "And I won't be the reason you regret that choice." Isabella's voice trembled as she tried to articulate the turmoil within her. "That's not... The media attention will only grow," she argued, her words tinged with uncertainty. "They'll dig into my past, reveal everything about Sarah, about the accident. It will hurt the ranch's reputation, and your chances of making this place work." "I don't care about," Jack began, his eyes meeting hers with a fierce intensity that mirrored Cyclone's earlier defiant gaze. "You should care," he interrupted softly. "Your grandfather built something special here. A sanctuary for healing, but not if it's marred by scandal." Isabella's eyes softened as she recalled the passion that had once driven her. "Jack, please. I've seen the way you look at this land. the way you understand its true potential," she pleaded. A sad, knowing smile spread across his face. "You don't need me to make that happen," he said gently. "Cyclone trusts you now. I cannot, no. I won't be told what I can or cannot do." The force of her own words startled her, but she pressed on, voice resolute. "Yes, I'm choosing the ranch. Yes, I want to help people heal here. But don't you dare stand there and tell me I must choose between my future and the man who helped me find it." The air between them thickened with the unspoken history of shared pain and newfound hope. From the stable, Maeve's soft lullaby drifted on the evening breeze, a reminder of healing yet to come and a promise of tomorrow. Finally, Jack spoke once more, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be your next project." Isabella stepped closer, her eyes brimming with defiant tenderness. "Good," she replied, "because I don't want you to be my next redemption either." Behind them, Cyclone let out a soft, gentle nicker, his first sound since the helicopter incident, and turned his head toward the stable door, his eyes reflecting an almost impatient understanding. "Well," Maeve called out from inside with a touch of amusement, "are you two done being stubborn? Because this beautiful boy needs both of you and you need each other." Isabella could not help but let out a bittersweet laugh through her tears. "When did you become so wise, Maeve?" she asked. The old housekeeper only smiled, replying, "Oh, honey, I've been wise for as long as I've cared for this place. You're just finally ready to listen." Despite Maeve's words of quiet wisdom, by dawn the next day, Isabella found herself alone at Sunrise Ranch. The remnants of Jack's presence were everywhere. His saddle was missing from the tack room, his few belongings cleared from the bunkhouse, and all that remained was a handwritten note slipped under her door. "Some storms we have to weather alone. Take care of him. E." Even as the media circus raged on outside, Isabella moved through her days in a fog, mechanically handling interviews and deflecting probing questions about the mysterious horse whisperer who had vanished as abruptly as he had arrived. Cyclone, though recovered from his earlier panic, still seemed to carry a quiet sadness in his eyes. The spark of trust that had begun to shine through was now dimmed by his lingering loss. One morning, Maeve found Isabella sitting on the weathered fence, her untouched coffee growing cold. "He misses him too," Maeve remarked softly. "Animals know when a heart is hurting." Isabella could not bring herself to reply. The weight of everything she had sacrificed, her high-flying career, her once carefully charted future, her connections to a world that now felt hollow, should have been crushing. Yet all she felt was the profound absence of that quiet, steady presence that had once given her hope. Her phone buzzed again, a terse message from Miles, "Board meeting Monday, last chance to reconsider." Without a second thought, Isabella deleted the message and pulled up the viral video for what felt like the 100th time. Jack's face, streaked with tears as Cyclone touched him for the first time in so long, filled the screen with raw, unfiltered emotion. The stark truth of that moment, the unadorned pain and the fragile promise of healing, made her corporate life seem like nothing more than a hollow play she had been forced to perform. The days began to blur into one another as Isabella immersed herself in every aspect of ranch life, a world she had long neglected in favor of boardrooms and city lights. Determined to master the craft that her late grandfather had once cherished, she threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even her. Every morning, after a restless night of dreams mingled with memories, she rose early to study the behavior of the horses and to research advanced methods of trauma therapy. In quiet moments between tasks, she would pull out her sketchbook and labor over detailed plans for transforming what she now called Avalon Ranch into a haven of healing and hope. Yet despite her newfound focus and diligence, each sunrise found her instinctively glancing toward the road, yearning for the familiar silhouette of someone who had once been a vital part of her life. 1 week slowly stretched into 2. As the fervor of initial media attention began to wane and fresh news replaced the frenzy of viral headlines, local ranchers, those who had been initially skeptical about the city girl turned cowgirl, started to visit with warm smiles and words of encouragement. Among them was old Tom McAllister, a weathered hand who had spent decades working these lands. He carefully examined Isabella's early blueprints for a horse therapy program and remarked, "Your grandfather always said this place had healing in its bones. I know he'd be proud of what you're starting here." His eyes, crinkled in the soft glow of afternoon light, hinted at a deeper understanding of both the land and the souls who sought solace within it. With a gentle pause, he added quietly, "And I tell you, Jack was very special. He came here broken inside, yet he never allowed his own scars to stop him from helping others heal. Reminded me of another stubborn soul who once visited your grandfather's estate, trying to outrun the pain he carried inside." Isabella's throat tightened at the memory, and she whispered, "I was always running. From the day my mother died, from the way Dad buried himself in work to escape the grief." Those words hung heavy in the still air as she recalled a time when her heart had been too fragile to face the truth. And now, looking out over the vast fields and weathered barns of her very own ranch, she realized that she, too, was finally ready to stop running. That very evening, as the sky turned a deep indigo and shadows stretched long across the old study, Isabella found herself wandering into the room that once belonged to her grandfather. The walls were adorned with a gallery of memories, sepia-toned photographs of him alongside proud horses, laughing ranch hands, and a much younger Maeve, whose gentle smile had always conveyed wisdom beyond her years. In one quiet corner, almost hidden by a cascade of aging files, lay a photograph that Isabella had never noticed before. A snapshot of a teenage girl with wild, dark hair, sprawled on the hardwood floor and surrounded by scattered papers, lost in a peaceful sleep. Behind her, her grandfather's eyes shone with an unmistakable tenderness, a look so full of love it made Isabella's heart ache. "You took that picture the summer after your mother died," Maeve said softly from the doorway, her voice echoing memories of long-forgotten days. "You'd spend hours here, organizing his files, desperate to be perfect, to feel in control." Isabella reached out and lightly touched the glass of the frame, feeling the weight of unspoken history. "Never pushed me," she murmured. "Never told me I had to cry or force myself to talk about the pain. He simply let me be." Maeve's voice turned gentle as she added, "Sometimes the greatest love is knowing when to wait, when to allow someone to find their own way back to wholeness." In that moment, as Isabella slowly absorbed these tender truths, a spark of understanding lit within her. It was exactly what Jack had been doing with Cyclone. Never trying to fix the horse by force, but instead simply being present, offering silent assurance that he was not alone. Maeve's soft smile deepened as she said, "It seems to me there is more than one kind of healing unfolding here at Avalon Ranch." That night, unable to find sleep amid the turbulent mix of emotions and memories, Isabella slipped out into the cool embrace of a star-studded sky. She walked toward Cyclone's paddock, where the majestic stallion now moved with a calmness that belied the terror of the previous day's chaos. As he approached the weathered fence, his every measured step suggested a quiet recovery. Standing in the dim light, Isabella leaned close and whispered, "I understand now." She spoke not only to the horse but also to herself, acknowledging the reasons behind his earlier flight and, in a deeper sense, her own long-fought battles with fear. Slowly, she extended her hand, allowing Cyclone the freedom to decide if he would accept her gentle touch. "Sometimes," she murmured, "the scariest thing isn't the pain we carry, but the possibility of letting it go." At that, Cyclone's soft muzzle brushed her palm, a warm, velvet caress that seemed to seal a silent promise. In the distance, a lone coyote's call punctuated the stillness of the Texas night, its plaintive cry a reminder that no one was ever truly alone. The following morning, with an uncharacteristic burst of energy and purpose, Isabella drove into the nearby town, much to the surprise of Maeve, who had long since come to expect a more measured pace from her. Today, however, Isabella had a letter to write. A letter whose words she now knew exactly how to form. As she sat at an old wooden desk in a quiet corner of the local post office, Tom McAllister's encouraging words echoed in her mind. "Healing's funny that way. Sometimes you have to walk away to find your way back. The trick is knowing when to wait and when to fight for what matters." With a deep, steadying breath, she sealed the envelope and addressed it to McAllister's ranch, the very last place she recalled hearing that Jack had called home. "Whether he is still there or not, I must try," she resolved as she penned the final 3 lines. "Some storms are meant to be weathered together. Avalon Ranch needs you, and so do I. Driving back with the Texas sun painting the sky in vibrant hues of hope, Isabella finally grasped what her grandfather had always known. The greatest acts of love often involve giving someone the space to find their own way home. A week after sending her heartfelt letter, Isabella found herself once again in her grandfather's study, this time poring over applications for the new therapy program she intended to launch at Avalon Ranch. The morning sun streamed through freshly cleaned windows, casting a warm glow over the organized chaos of her desk. Stacks of veterinary textbooks, well-thumbed psychology journals, and hand-drawn blueprints for renovating the old barn lay before her. As she meticulously reviewed each application, her phone buzzed repeatedly with messages bearing Miles's name. This time, however, she answered without hesitation. "The board meeting is in an hour," Miles announced curtly. "I've saved your seat." His voice, once so persuasive, now sounded distant and unimportant. "A car is waiting at," she began, but then interjected calmly, "No, Miles, I'm not coming back." His tone shifted to one of disbelief as he tried to argue. "This is career suicide, Isabella. Everything we built was based on running away." Unmoved, she stepped to the window overlooking Cyclone's paddock. "I'm done running," she declared firmly. After hanging up, she watched as Cyclone carried out his morning routine, each cautious step now imbued with purpose and a quiet resolve to move closer to his companions. Soon, a disturbance at the front gate caught her attention. Maeve was animatedly speaking with someone in town, her hands gesturing with a passion that Isabella had never seen before. Her heart pounded as she forced herself to remain by the window, knowing that she had already made her choice with the letter. Moments later, Cyclone's sudden, insistent whinny redirected her gaze back to the paddock. The horse, alert and curious, stood with his ears pricked as he stared at something beyond her view. Then, carried by a gentle morning breeze, came a familiar melody, soft yet stirring. Isabella bolted from her seat, racing through the study door, down the creaking stairs and across the dew-kissed yard until she reached the paddock gate. There, standing with his hat in hand, was Jack, looking both exactly as she remembered him and unmistakably changed, more open and present than before. His storm-gray eyes met hers with an intensity that seemed to make the world around them vanish. "Your letter found me," he said simply, his voice resonant with quiet emotion. "I wasn't sure it would, and I wasn't sure I deserved it too." He stepped closer, his gaze never wavering, and continued, "I spent 2 long weeks trying to convince myself that leaving was the right thing to do." His voice faltered, thick with regret, as he added, "And then I realized I was doing exactly what I told Cyclone not to do, letting my fear of pain stop me from trusting again." Behind them, Cyclone moved steadily toward the fence. Without breaking eye contact with Isabella, Jack reached out, giving the horse space to decide whether to make contact. In that delicate moment, Cyclone's muzzle brushed gently against Jack's hand, a greeting reminiscent of old friends reuniting after long separation. "I went back to Montana," Jack admitted quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I needed to say goodbye properly, to stop using Sarah's memory as a shield." Isabella stood silent, granting him the space he needed, just as he had once granted that same space to Cyclone. "I love this work so much," he continued softly, a small smile breaking through as he added, "helping horses heal and watching as they help people heal." With a gentle determination, he murmured, "I used to say that every broken spirit deserves a second chance at joy. She would have loved what you're building here, what we could create together." Isabella corrected him tenderly, "What we could create here." In that moment, Cyclone nudged Jack's shoulder with a playful insistence that made them both laugh, a sound that cut through the lingering tension like a ray of sunlight. From the porch, Maeve called out cheerfully, "I think someone's voting yes," as if to confirm that destiny had brought them together once again. Drawing closer, Isabella saw flecks of gold shimmer in Jack's storm-gray eyes as he looked at her. "I'm not asking you to forget her," she said softly, "or to be anything other than who you are." "And who am I?" he replied in a voice so hushed it barely carried on the wind. "I'm someone who learned that true strength isn't about controlling everything. It's about having the courage to feel everything deeply." Gently, she reached up and caressed his cheek. "Real strength lies in being brave enough to let yourself feel all the pain and all the joy." Leaning into her touch, Jack closed his eyes for a moment. "I'm not very good at letting people in," he admitted with a rueful smile, "but maybe that's because I've been too stubborn all my life." As her thumb tenderly brushed away a tear he hadn't known had escaped, she whispered, "Perhaps it's all that wild spirit my grandfather always spoke about." A soft, approving sound from Cyclone, an almost imperceptible whinny, drew their eyes together. The proud stallion then stepped back and deliberately walked to his gate, pausing as if to bestow his silent blessing upon the reunited pair. "Would you look at that?" Jack said with a quiet wonder as they approached the gate together, Isabella's hand intertwining with his in a natural, comforting embrace. When they reached Cyclone, the great horse stretched out his long neck and, in a gesture of deep connection, touched each of them in turn, as if to say he accepted them both as they were, imperfections and all. "I think he's teaching us something about trust," Isabella murmured, her voice soft and full of reverence, and perhaps about second chances too. Jack's eyes held a mixture of questioning hope and a promise that shone like a beacon in the early light. Without another word, Isabella lifted herself onto her tiptoes and pressed a long, tender kiss to his lips. It began as a hesitant peck and grew into a deep, unburdening embrace of emotion, the kind that washes away years of loneliness and pain. When they finally parted, their faces glistened with tears, and smiles intertwined. "Welcome home," she whispered against his lips, a simple phrase heavy with meaning. Behind them, Maeve quietly wiped her eyes and slipped back into the house, leaving the pair to their newfound closeness. Overhead, the Texas sun began to rise once again, painting the sky with brilliant colors of new beginnings. In the paddock, Cyclone stood sentinel, his gaze soft and watchful, as if acknowledging that some storms bring not only destruction, but also the possibility of renewal. Yet just as the perfect morning seemed to settle, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the porch, carrying Miles's lawyers. Isabella's hands trembled as she read the legal notice delivered that day. "They claim that grandfather wasn't mentally competent when he changed his will," she said in disbelief, joined by Jack. "They argue that leaving me the ranch instead of selling it to the development group is evidence of diminished capacity." Anger and sorrow mingled in her voice as she crumpled the paper. "Can they really do that?" she demanded. "Miles knows every judge in the county, and his firm has resources I can't possibly match." Before they could dwell further on the matter, a commotion arose near Cyclone's paddock. Excited voices and the clicking of cameras signaled a crowd gathering by the fence. Maeve explained hurriedly that local news had caught wind of the legal challenge. "But that's not all," she added, holding out her tablet to Isabella. On the screen, the social media feed exploded with shares of the viral video, now adorned with hundreds of new comments, from people sharing their own stories of healing through horses. "Look at this," Maeve urged. "Here is a veteran with PTSD who found peace by working with rescued horses, and here's another." In the twilight of a new day, as the gentle hum of life at Avalon Healing Ranch continued, Isabella scrolled through heartwarming messages on her phone. One story caught her eye, a young child with autism who had spoken his first words to a therapy pony. Each account was a testament to the transformative power of connection, and as she read further, her heart swelled with hope. The comments all echoed the same question: when will the ranch's therapy program finally open its doors to those in need? Isabella turned to Jack, whose presence had become as constant as the dawn light. His quiet confidence reassured her, even as uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "We've only just begun to plan," Jack reminded her, his voice a soothing whisper against the soft morning breeze. "But we have all the research, and all the plans are laid out." His words, gentle and persuasive, filled her with the resolve to show everyone the true potential of Avalon Healing Ranch. As if on cue, Cyclone, the once turbulent but now noble stallion, let out a resounding whinny that reverberated across the paddock. The crowd gathered near the fence parted like the sea as he approached with regal bearing, completely transformed from the frightened creature of days past. "He's right," Isabella declared suddenly, her voice echoing with newfound determination. "This isn't just about preserving our ranch, it's about what this place means to all those who desperately need healing." Straightening her shoulders, she instructed Maeve, "Call Tom McAllister and the other local ranchers. We're having a town meeting." The next day, the great barn at Avalon was abuzz with anticipation. Local families, ranchers, veterinarians, and mental health professionals packed into the weathered building to hear Isabella's vision for the future. Standing before them, with Jack's steadfast presence by her side and Cyclone visible through the open barn doors, she found her voice and spoke passionately. "My grandfather believed in the healing power of this land," Isabella began, her tone both reflective and resolute. "Not merely for horses, but for people too. He saw in Avalon something that developers like Miles and his associates never will: a power of connection, a trust rebuilt through compassion, and the miracle of second chances." Her words resonated in the silent crowd as she unfolded her plans for a comprehensive therapy center. The program would blend traditional horse rehabilitation with innovative trauma recovery techniques, promising economic growth for the community through new jobs and revitalized hope for those in need. As she concluded her presentation, Isabella smiled and said, "But don't take just my word for it." Outside, Jack and Cyclone performed a quiet demonstration. The pair moved together in perfect harmony in the training ring, showcasing the trust they had painstakingly built over months of tender care. To the amazement of all, Cyclone then trotted calmly toward a wheelchair-bound veteran seated by the fence. With deliberate gentleness, the horse lowered his head, allowing the veteran to reach out and stroke his muzzle. "This," Isabella's voice rang clear, "is the very essence of what our community stands for, a testament to healing and hope. They want to replace our ranch with a luxury resort, but this moment, this healing, this hope, cannot be bought with any price tag." Tom McAllister, standing among the crowd with quiet authority, spoke up, "My family has been ranching here for 4 generations. We know what truly matters." He then turned to the assembled crowd and asked, "Who's with us?" The overwhelming support was palpable. Within days, lawyers volunteered pro bono services, mental health experts offered to develop the therapeutic programs, and local media ran story after story about the community's rally around Avalon Healing Ranch's mission. A week later, when Miles's legal team returned with a challenge to claim that Isabella's grandfather was not mentally competent when he changed his will, they found not just Isabella, but an entire community united in defiance. The message was loud and clear. Avalon Healing Ranch was not for sale, not at any price. That evening, as the Texas sun painted the horizon in brilliant hues of victory and renewal, Isabella and Jack sat together on the time-worn porch steps. They watched Cyclone graze peacefully in the paddock, a silent guardian who had borne witness to their struggles and triumphs. "You know," Jack said softly, his voice heavy with memory, "Sarah used to say that sometimes the greatest miracles come disguised as challenges." Isabella leaned into him, much like a fragile city soul clinging to hope, as if she were a wounded creature finding solace in his embrace. Jack's tender kiss on her temple spoke of shared grief and the promise of new beginnings, while Cyclone, as if in approval, lifted his head and let out a gentle, affirming nicker. A year later, the transformation at Avalon was undeniable. Standing at the newly renovated entrance, Isabella gazed at the shining new sign, Avalon Healing Center, where second chances begin. The morning sun bathed the sign in golden light, and the sound of rhythmic hoofbeats drew her attention to the training ring. There, Jack worked patiently with a rescued Arabian, its eyes reflecting the timid vulnerability that Cyclone once exhibited. Cyclone, now an icon of healing and resilience, had earned a devoted fan club. Children enrolled in the therapy program squealed with delight as they watched him gently accept carrots from their small, eager hands. Veterans found calm in grooming his gleaming coat, their troubled minds soothed by the steady rhythm of his presence. As Jack wrapped his arms around Isabella from behind, she turned in his embrace and whispered with a smile, "Did you ever imagine that first morning, when you were lurking by the fence, would lead us here?" Jack's warm laugh mingled with the morning air. "Honestly," he replied, "I was just trying to figure out how to tell a stuck-up city girl that her horse needed a friend more than a trainer." "Stuck up," she retorted playfully, swatting his chest. "I prefer to think of it as professionally focused." He grinned and gently corrected, "Professionally terrified, maybe." Tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear, he added, "Just like someone else we both know." Together, they turned to watch Cyclone, who now roamed freely in a transformed paddock. A spacious, natural habitat that served as a sanctuary for all. The mighty horse had become a gentle guardian for a recently rescued filly, guiding her with patient care to the sweetest patches of grass. Tears welled in Isabella's eyes as she murmured, Your grandfather would be proud, wouldn't he? Maeve, joining them with a cup of steaming coffee in hand, said softly, he would be proud of both the ranch and of you. Isabella's thoughts drifted back to the old photograph in her grandfather's study. A faded image of a teenage girl, so determined and anxious to control a chaotic world, now juxtaposed with the quiet acceptance she had learned to embrace. The realization was profound. Letting go, trusting in the power of love and time, could heal wounds that never seemed to close. Soon, the sound of approaching cars announced the arrival of the day's first visitors, a diverse group comprising local veterans, families with special needs children, and troubled teens who had found refuge in the equine therapy program. Ready for another day of miracles? Jack asked, his arm wrapping around her waist. With you, always, she replied, her voice filled with conviction as they walked together toward the gathering crowd. Jack greeted each person by name, his quiet strength radiating a comfort that reached deep into the hearts of those he encountered. Isabella saw reflected in his eyes the same tranquility she had first glimpsed during that stormy night long ago, the serene peace of someone who had finally found his way home. A young girl in a wheelchair pointed excitedly at Cyclone. "Look, Miss Isabella, he remembers me," she exclaimed. Sure enough, Cyclone ambled over, his soft nickering acknowledging the child as if to say, "I never forget a friend." "None of us ever truly forget," Isabella assured the child gently, helping guide her closer to the fence. Later that evening, as the Texas sky softened into twilight and the first stars began to glimmer, Isabella and Jack sat once more on the porch steps. Her head rested contentedly on his shoulder, his arm warm and protective around her waist. Cyclone grazed nearby, occasionally lifting his head to check on them, as if silently ensuring that his human family was safe. "You know what Sarah used to say about all of this?" Jack murmured, his voice a tender blend of memory and joy. "What did she say?" Isabella asked, curiosity and affection in her tone. "She said that love doesn't just heal, it transforms. Everything it touches becomes something new, something more," he replied, gazing deeply into her eyes. With a gentle smile, Isabella reached up and touched the simple gold band on her finger, a recent token that matched the one on his hand. "I think," she said softly, "that she led you here. To Cyclone, to me, to all of this." "To home," Jack agreed, kissing her tenderly. From the paddock, Cyclone let out another gentle nicker, as if blessing their union. As the stars began to dot the darkening Texas sky, each shimmering light felt like a dream made real, a broken heart made whole, a living testament to the power of trust and the promise of second chances. Perhaps Avalon Healing Center isn't just a ranch, it's a place where broken souls find their way back home. A once wild stallion who learned to trust again. A scarred man who rediscovered how to love. And a woman who once lived in skyscrapers, now choosing to stay where the wind speaks and the heart can finally breathe. You see, sometimes healing doesn't come from fixing someone, it comes from walking through the storm together. There are wounds that don't need words, just a look, a gentle touch, or simply someone who stays. If this story touched your heart, let me know in the comments below. What moment moved you the most? Have you ever met your own Cyclone person, or part of yourself you thought was beyond saving? Share your story, because someone out there might need to read your words to believe in second chances again. And if you believe that everyone deserves a second chance, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell so you never miss our next healing journey. I'll see you in the next story.